Hi, Warriors. My name is Meg Vanderwood, and I'm a writer for the University of Waterloo. Today, I am speaking with alumnus Asif Khan about location data and public health. Asif is the founder of the Location-Based Marketing Association, a global nonprofit organization that helps businesses using location-based data navigate the evolving and complex ecosystem of geospatial opportunity. He's also the founder and CEO of Groundlevel Insights, an artificial intelligence startup that helps businesses and governments turn geolocation data into strategic decisions. In 2020, Groundlevel Insights created Canatrace, a service that securely collects contact tracing information from employees or patrons during the COVID-19 pandemic. Canatrace is completely free and bilingual. Thank you for joining me today, Asif.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Great.
And
So,
hello to my fellow workers. So yeah.
yeah, we're happy to have you. So it sounds like a lot of your time is spent working with geolocation data. Can you explain what that is and how is it used?
Yeah, I mean, we could go all the way back in time. I mean, to the Dutch colonists and the early map makers of the world and so on. I mean, geolocation data, essentially has been around forever, since people made maps. And the interesting thing I think is with the advent of smartphones and mobile devices, the way we consume, collect, and use that data has greatly shifted over the last couple of decades in particular. And so today it's really a world of, looking at location data that's collected sort of in the outdoor environment from satellites and cellular networks and GPS, as well as sort of what we'll classify as micro-location data, what's happening indoors, inside of buildings, at very finite levels of being able to look at where people are within a building. And so often we'll use technologies like Bluetooth or magnetic positioning or other types of tech to determine that.
Yeah, that's great. And so this year you also created a service for contact tracing called Canatrace. Why did you create that and how will it help the public stay safe during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, so when I started Groundlevel Insights, the company that you introduced at the beginning, one of the things that we really wanted to do was to not just build a profitable tech company, but to have a bit of a double bottom line approach, to find ways to give back to our local community, support businesses around us, work with local vendors, and those kinds of things. And so when the pandemic hit, we were really looking to see what can we do? We're a company rooted in, data and analytics and artificial intelligence. What can we do, in pandemic times? And so what we kind of saw was a lot of initially bars and restaurants and businesses that we were all visiting being asked and required by their government to collect contact tracing follow-up information, name, email address, phone number, et cetera. But everywhere I went and people that I knew were going to, these businesses were doing it on pen and paper, clipboards at the door, people's personal information sitting out in the open, for anybody to take. And we just thought, well, first of all, this is 2020. Why are we using pen and paper? And secondly, like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a more, digital and efficient system. And we're like, hey, we know lots about data. We know about security. We know how to do this stuff. That's where we can help. And so we kind of built a simple QR-based data collection tool, kind of put it out to just local businesses in and around where we all live. And we started to see some adoption, and people were quite happy to say, hey, we can get rid of this paper. We don't have to kill any more trees. And, we can do this digitally. And based on that early success, we decided let's roll this out as something to really help any and every business we can across the country. And so we put some branding behind it. We named it Canatrace. We made sure that if we're doing this nationally, it's a fully bilingual service as well, as all things in Canada should be. And we rolled it out there. And today, it's been up in the market now for about just over 3 weeks. We're almost 1,500 businesses across the country have signed up from Newfoundland to BC. And it's, we're seeing just a lot of great traction around it. And we're really excited that, we have a way to help and give back.
Yeah, that's really great. And great for small businesses that it's both free and bilingual, as you say. Um, So
Yeah.
something that I thought of immediately as we started talking about Canatrace was I was wondering how it's different from the government's COVID alert app, and it sounds like they could really work together pretty well. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so the two things are completely mutually exclusive. Like, so COVID alert, great initiative by our federal government, adopted by the vast majority of provinces, is really about person to person notification that you may have come into contact with somebody who's tested positive. And so it's a consumer facing initiative that they're trying to get the entire population to install and download and play with. And so the idea with COVID alert is that if you've tested positive and you have the COVID alert app on your phone, you get a code and you log in and you say, sort of identify in an anonymous fashion that you're a positive case. And if somebody comes within close proximity to you from a Bluetooth point of view, who also has the app, they can get a notification that they may have been exposed. So that's how COVID Alert works, and that's kind of its goal and its function. What we're doing with Canatrace is completely, on serving the business community. So where that's a consumer-facing tool, Canatrace is all about helping businesses that are being required by government to collect contact tracing follow-up data, collect that data in a more efficient fashion than they're doing with pen and paper type of systems. And one of the further challenges there is not only do they have to collect the data, the types of data they have to collect changes all the time, depending on what the rules of the day are, whether in Ontario, for example, whether they're in a green or yellow zone or orange or red zone, the questions that you have to ask are different. And so being able to adapt on the fly, being able to change your questionnaire on the fly, all those kinds of things are really important. And so that's something that we're able to do because we're doing it digitally, and we can have templates and switch them out and so on.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thanks. The next question is more about the privacy of the data, because we've all heard about the concerns with apps that track our location and exploit our personal information. And I know that many people were concerned about what they saw on Netflix's documentary Social Dilemma.
Yeah.
But the COVID-19 pandemic has uncovered some really positive uses for this personal data as well, like with the contact tracing. So do you think that this could maybe be a door that is open for more hopeful conversations about how our data is being used?
100%. I mean, if I put on my hat as the founder of the Location-Based Marketing Association, looking at it from a global perspective, I would say, many governments, outside of North American market, if you look at South Korea or you look at China or Israel or markets like that, have really kind of gone well beyond something like the COVID Alert app in using location data to understand the movements of people within society and use that data to alert people in different ways. And yes, there is a privacy trade-off for sure. But I think at the end of the day, people, the vast majority of people would rather know that they may have been exposed or feel like there's a sense of safety that's coming from the use of their data than not know. And I think we're seeing that in many, many markets. In North America, I think it's a bit more challenging. Our privacy regulations are a bit more stringent, let's say, than it might be in China or South Korea, or other markets where the government can be a little more free on how they apply technology. But that being said, what we're seeing is, I think overall, is an awakening within the consumer population to the value of their location data. It's not even COVID specific. I would say if you were to ask the average citizen, are they willing to give up, their Uber app or their Waze app or their weather app or their Starbucks app or whatever, that all of those apps use location data. And we're okay with that. We consent to that because the value proposition, the exchange that we get, the marginal utility that we derive from that in terms of understanding, hey, I'm getting, accurate weather data, or I'm getting, to know where my Uber driver is on the way, by sharing my location data, like that's valuable to me, and I'm willing to exchange my privacy for that. And I think to some extent, the COVID pandemic has also shown that, in proper use cases, having access to this type of data in real time can really benefit society.
Yeah, for sure. We need it to better understand what's happening on the ground with COVID-19. Um, so we've also seen a shift recently in this conversation about data privacy that recognizes the onus that each of us have as individuals to be informed about the apps and devices that we're using and understand what they're collecting about us and our movements. So as someone who knows firsthand how some companies are using this data, what questions do you think that consumers should ask before they accept the terms and conditions of a new app?
I think it's a difficult question because there really isn't a way for a consumer to ask a question of an app provider, right? It's not the way it works, right? So typically you're interested in an app, you download that app from the App Store, and when you go to install it or first launch it, it comes up with those consent questions on initially on install, and then quite often nowadays, when it comes to location data, are you willing to share your location? Yes, no, and you have to consent to that. In the latest versions of iOS and Android operating systems, that's even more granular, where it's every time your location's being used, you're being warned about that, with a pop-up message or things like that. So I think from what questions should people ask? I think as a society, what we should be demanding is that these app companies overall are more articulate in terms of how they're using your data. So when you go to have that consent relationship, if you actually take the time to read it, because not everybody does, but if you do, in that consent discussion should be a proper articulation of the value exchange that I alluded to earlier. So what are you using it for? How is it being used? How is it being stored? Who owns the data? Is the data being resold? And so on and so on and so on, right? I mean, there's so many things to think about, but I think at the end of the day, you can distill it down to the simple, if you can demonstrate and articulate a value exchange, like, hey, you need this data in order to provide me with this service, and I want that service, then I think the general population is going to be okay with that.
Right, that makes sense because it's an exchange of data for service.
Yeah, it can't be one way for sure, right? I mean,
Right.
if it's just you taking my data and you're going and selling my data and monetizing my data, then there's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's really valuable information for anyone who has a phone or any kind of device, really. Right. So one last question for you, and this is something that we ask all alumni that we talk to. If you could go back to the day that you graduated from the University of Waterloo, what advice would you give to yourself? Since then, you've done a lot of different things in the startup world. You've been a serial entrepreneur. So what would you tell yourself looking back?
What I would say, and what I say to future entrepreneurs I'm talking to all the time is sort of dream big. But for me, the one thing that I've kind of learned along the way is, don't pigeonhole yourself into kind of one discipline or whatever it is that you studied or what have you. I mean, in certain cases, if you're in medicine, you're in medicine, or if you're in physics, you're in physics. But, I think for me, like, I came out of the sort of math and economics and side of the, the field. And here I am working, building technology startups, right? And I think, what I've learned is, roll up your sleeves and learn a little bit about everything, right? You don't have to be an expert in everything. You can surround yourselves with experts, who are, have the discipline and have the knowledge in the different areas, but make sure you know enough about every part of the business, right? That you're building. And I think, so, you do want to, there's an opportunity right now to kind of be that Renaissance person, and really, have a good broad base of across multiple disciplines. And I encourage people to do that, because I think it's, yeah, it not just makes you a better business person or a better entrepreneur. I think it just makes you a better person person more knowledgeable about everybody around you and society around you and issues and politics and everything else, right? So, I mean, that at least that's my opinion. So,
yeah, sound advice for young entrepreneurs or people pursuing any career, really. Well, Asif, thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's been a pleasure.
you're very welcome. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and really, really excited to reconnect with the Waterloo community.